Hello, my name is Kayla Moore, and I'm just going to be briefly explaining my journal entries since being in this English composition course. So I have my notebook right here, and I'm just going to explain to you what they kind of mean. So my first journal entry was titled Breathe In Experience, Breathe Out Poetry, and in this journal I just kind of talked about different things that I've endured during the course of my life. So one of the things was how I put my education first, and I'm always studying at night, very long hours, and that eventually that time will be worth it because I am able to understand the criteria that I am being taught. I also talked about how I moved from state to state because of my dad's job and because of my family. So I talked about how at one point we were poor, but I never realized it because my parents made sure that I had the things I needed to fit in and to be stable. So for journal number 2, it was titled No One Tells the Whole Story or the Whole Recipe. And the background behind this journal, I was kind of trying to put myself in a real world situation with something that I've endured or something that I've heard of that has happened before. So when I think of somebody not telling the whole story, I think about someone telling a story to me and they're not giving me the full details. And there's multiple reasons for this. One of them is that they can be forgetful. Sometimes people skip around when telling a story, and that's because they forget certain parts or details of it. Another reason is that sometimes people try to prevent themselves from getting in trouble or getting their loved ones in trouble. And sometimes that issue or situation that they're skipping, that can fall back on them or turn against them, which might be a liability. Another thing that I think about when not telling the whole recipe is a business. So I plan on starting a photography business pretty soon. And sometimes people ask me, how do you take these pictures? What software do you use? What camera do you use? And I try not to give off too much information because I don't want them to steal my ideas or steal from my business. And one reason because of that is because I have not copyrighted my ideas yet. So I think that's what went behind this journal. So for journal number 3, this was actually a free write, and at the time I was going through a roommate situation where we were just not agreeing on certain things about the room, and I just found it really fascinating how the way you were raised and grew up really depicts how you treat others and the way you grow up in the future. So I talk about how when you were younger, maybe you went to sleep at a certain time, and when you got to college, you're so used to going to sleep at that certain time that you have to, change your schedule. I also talk about how if you were raised as a single child, you might not be used to sharing a specific area, common room, stuff like that. And now you come to college and you have to share a whole room, a bathroom, a shower, all those types of things. And so I just found that the agreement that I went with my roommate, it wasn't fair in how we're paying the same amount for the same amount of area. So that's kind of what journal number 3 was about. So journal number 4 was titled Things You Want to Get from a Poem. So at the time of writing this journal, I was still very unaware of the structure of how poetry is supposed to look or be written. But I did know that it needed to have a stanza, or whether that was a short one or a very long stanza. But I do know that I always like to be able to follow through in the storyline. I hate feeling clueless. I also knew that I like to see imagery in poems. I like to know exactly what's happening when I read the poem. And imagery is one thing that we talked about later on within the lesson in this English composition course. I also like to be able to feel the emotions that the characters have and just be able to be in the same moment as the characters. So for journal number 5, I talked about history, and unfortunately the first thing I think about when talking about history is slaves. But in my head, I divide history into multiple different sections. So the first part I have is white Americans and African Americans. Another thing I think about is current history and older history, which is probably like the 1900s and older for older history. And then I also think about segregation, how blacks had to use different public transportation, restrooms, all that good things. And then I also think about different racist terms that white Americans used to call slaves and African Americans. So journal number 6 was actually a free write, and for this journal I kind of just reflected on journal number 3, which was on January 20th, And I kind of just talked about how my situation with my roommate settled and how I no longer have a roommate, but it kind of just handled all my problems, so I didn't have to worry about studying in a different area. I could study in my room. I didn't have to worry about what time I had to turn the lights off and go to sleep. I didn't have to be quiet as much anymore, and that's what Journal 6 was about. I was just more happier. So journal number 7 was another free write. Everybody in college wants to aim for a 4.0 GPA. Unfortunately, I did not get that 4.0 GPA last semester, but I think it was my fault. There were ways that I could better myself to get that 4.0 GPA that I wanted. And some of them was to stop cram studying. A lot of times I study maybe a day, maybe 2 days before the test. And one thing that I can do to better myself is to start studying a few days, maybe a week before the test, so that I am not stressing myself out. Another thing that I talked about was how I need to use my resources on this FAMU's campus. Some things are just asking more questions, going to my professor's office hours, going to the study lab, going to tutoring. There's plenty of resources on this campus, and I feel like I'm not utilizing them correctly. So I just feel like I got lucky last semester with not being able to study long hours, but it's my fault. And if I really want to do what I achieve, the grades that I want, then I just need to put in more work. So journal number 8 was another free write, and at the time I was very stressed and overwhelmed with my schoolwork. I had quizzes, tests, homework assignments that were just due back to back, and I felt like I was not getting the undergraduate experience of just having fun. Not all the time, but being able to relax sometimes. I felt like I was so stressed that it was taking over me. There would be times when my friends would hang out and I would want to hang out with them, but I can't because I have to study or do a homework assignment. And they started realizing at one point that you're working all the time. You don't have any time to yourself. You don't have any time to rest. And that's kind of what this journey is about, just being stressed all the time and not having time to myself. So journal number 9 was another free write, and in here I'm just talking about my different friendships that I've had on campus. So I used to have a girl group. Unfortunately, that did not work out, but sometimes I feel like girls feel like they're entitled to something. A lot of times I'll meet new people on campus, we talk one time and then we don't talk again. They act like they cannot speak. So I do have 2 guys that I hang out with all the time and I do everything with. And they've just been really down for me. They are loyal, they stick by me, and they've become more of like a brother figure than anything, more of like a friendship. And I just love them and make it aware to them that they have helped me so much on this campus and that I appreciate them. So that is what journal number 9 is about. You guys, we have finally made it. This is journal number 10, and this was another free write. When I did write this journal, I did learn about the different types of poems and the structure of how to write certain poems. And so you can kind of see that in my writing. But in this journal, I'm just overall talking about how blessed I am over the course of my life, or recently actually. I talk about how my phone is pretty cracked, as you can see. I just talking about how there's cracks in the phone, it's peeling in the front, but I am just blessed. I talk about how recently I got an iPad for Christmas, and my parents kind of didn't have the funds for it, but they knew how much it would benefit me for college and taking my notes for classes, so they got it for me anyways. I also talk about how I personally feel like I'm wearing the same clothes and shoes every day. There's no mix in my wardrobe, and although I don't have the funds for that right now because I am in college on a budget, I feel like I am able to work for that, whether that's over the summer, during the school year. I'm going to get it some way, somehow. And lastly, I recently got an RA position working with the University of Housing, and that you get paid for it, but you also get benefits for that as well. But that is just going to be able to help me have some pocket money, but also help my parents pay off certain parts of my tuition. And overall, I'm just grateful for the different opportunities and resources that I've had from my parents. And yeah, thanks for watching.